I can see you. I can hear you. I can see you.
Great.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm really, really glad to have you here. We've had so many awesome conversations, and I'm excited to kind of share, with you my vision as well as, I think we can kind of bounce off of each other because I'm interested in some of your opinions as well. One of your videos, I have to shout it out. I should have brought it up to play it actually. The video you did with attention, I think
Mm-hmm.
it was 2 years ago. That video was really awesome, and you actually shouted out Maryland in there and what was some things that were going on in Maryland. So we've talked about that a few times throughout the conference, even. But yeah, I would love. Go ahead, you take over.
Well, thank you so much, Hope. I know this is certainly your conference you're convening, and I'm thrilled that you had me to be a part of it on 420. And while I'm not a consumer so much, I definitely appreciate how the cannabis industry is really, I think, at the forefront at figuring out how to ensure that we are equitably treated after a system treated us so poorly.
Right.
So I think I first just want to understand from you, why this conference? Obviously, why now? We know why now, given the date,
Yeah.
but why this particular conference? And what are your hopes for going forward with it?
Yeah, definitely. So this came about 15 days ago. Maybe
Wow.
more than that. Yeah, it was right after I realized that this was going to be a long-term thing. Our president didn't do a good job of warning us. So
Mhm.
I was one of those people that didn't really think that this was that serious at first. So, I was planning 420 celebrations. We were doing stuff at the store, my store right now. Shout out to Mary and Maine. Shout out to my amazing staff, by the way, Dexter, Justin, Malachi, everybody who's holding it down there, Anthony, our security guard. I mean, I know you guys are like swamped right now. So shout out to you. I love you guys. But we were planning all these events, and once I realized that it was not all going to happen, I was really disappointed because 420, and I've said this a few times throughout the conference, for me, my birthday is April 29th.
Oh,
Yeah.
happy
So
early birthday.
thank you. So, this time of year is normally really exciting for me. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I was a supporter of the industry even before. So this time of the year, I'm normally celebrating, and especially, since we opened up our store, I'm normally having a good time. So I wanted to be able to still connect with people, have fun. But I'm all about teaching people about this industry. So many people are interested and they don't know much, or they might know a lot from one aspect of the industry and not as much from another. So, I thought this conference would be a great idea. I actually was inspired by some of my other friends that did an online conference based on entrepreneurship with this same platform. And I just thought the platform was so awesome and intuitive, easy to use to an extent. It's definitely still have kinks they have to work out, but it's a new.
I was the king today. I was the whole thing by myself.
I mean,
Just
it's not
kidding.
that it's a little hard, and it has server issues and stuff. But I mean, it's still awesome that we can connect like this. The way that you can chat, the networking ability, the expo hall. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of companies adapt to the platform later. But yeah, I just thought it would be a really great way to still be able to connect and really have that kind of in-person experience, and then be able to bring so many different speakers. We had over 50 speakers at
That's
this conference.
fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
So yeah, it was just the perfect storm, kind of, to make for a really great event. And although these are very unfortunate times, we're making the best out of it, and that's what I think. That's part of what 420 is about.
Mhm. Well, so one of the things I think is so important is when we start talking about our economic opportunity, we can't do that without thinking about all of the places where we've been. And as I said from the beginning, like this is an industry where you're starting to at least see discussions about the importance of equity, given our experience with the criminal justice system as it relates to
Mhm.
cannabis. One thing that comes to mind for me, Hope, and I talk about it a lot, is where I grew up in Seattle.
Yeah.
There's a cross street, 23rd and Union, which is in the CD in the Central District. And on that corner, there used to be a cheesesteak spot, and then my church is right next door to the old cheesesteak spot. Well, also in front of that cheesesteak spot, a lot of guys that I grew up with, either went to elementary school with or middle school with or whatever, they used to like sell weed and they would be arrested. Now, where that cheesesteak spot is, there is a weed shop. Yeah, or a cannabis dispensary, yes. But we call them weed shops. And so I think that it is a fascinating thought that that man is called Uncle Ike's is making hand over fist what anybody ever sold on that corner, like nowhere near. And so in your mind is a part of what we know are the existing inequities in the system. Is that part of what drives you or what drove you to get involved with the cannabis business at all?
So I'll say it wasn't my initial drive, but I think it's because I was naive at first, if I'm being honest. I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, and a lot of people know it as one of the more affluent areas for African Americans. It's actually been deemed the most affluent county in the United States. So I grew up around, a lot of Black people that were doing well. However, that doesn't mean that I didn't see the war on drugs have an effect on our community. I did. And honestly, where I'm from, one street, it's great. The next street is not. So, I've seen it all, but at the same time, I was a little bit naive to it. So originally my drive came from the economic opportunity. And I was thinking about social equity, but from a different perspective. I was thinking about how to build generational wealth for my family and then be able to help other people. And I thought this industry would be a great way. Not to mention, I always I was always a consumer. I'll be honest, that from a very young age, probably way too young, younger than I would allow.
How old were you, Hope?
I was like 15, honestly. Your eyes.
You got to subtract 3 years. Hope was 12 out here blazing. Y'all.
Oh no, I wasn't 12. I wasn't that bad. But I know plenty of people. Look, I know people that I know plenty, and they turned out.
My brother was 14.
14.
And that's the reason why I was afraid, because he got to smoke weed every day. Shout out to Bubba and my dad.
Yeah, you can get dependent on it. See, people think that you can get dependent on it. And there is a withdrawal period if you have to get off. But it's not. So the withdrawal, I'm saying this very loosely, like I'm not a doctor, but at the same time, it is not like a physical withdrawal where you have to have more weed or you will die, like it is from a drug withdrawal. It's more like you might just have trouble eating and sleeping for a week.
Wow. That's like caffeine.
Exactly.
It's any substance. We also know that there are several health benefits. So to the point, I know you said that initially the inequities or whatever weren't one of your drivers, and you said, but you were naive.
Right.
What are some of the things where you got exposed to, okay, you know what? Okay, now I need to be doing this for a cause bigger than just my own intergenerational wealth or for my family?
The first thing that I think I noticed was, I think there's two sides to social equity. So there's like ownership within the industry, and then there's actual like the communities and the people that have been affected. So my first exposure and real eye-opening experience was when I actually applied for the license. Well, no, I'll even start before then. Going to networking events and realizing I was the only Black person in the room. I was oftentimes the youngest person in the room. So it was difficult to be able to start the conversations. Luckily, I was coming from investment banking. So I was used to talking to older men, all the time, older white men even at that. And, I was used to that and I knew how to carry those conversations. But, it definitely little eye-opening experience, because I expected going into cannabis that I would see more Black faces at the table, but I didn't. I saw Black faces doing that, but I really got exposed to it when we applied for our first license. This was the biggest eye-opener. And I thought, and I know everyone who's applied, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are watching right now that have applied for licenses, some that have been successful and some that have not. And I've been on both sides myself. I remember feeling like our application, like we put so much effort into it. I was like, oh, this application is the best thing since sliced bread. We are going to win. No, like you said in your video, no African American companies were awarded a or like grow license in Maryland. One was awarded a processing license. But, so it just, I realized, I was like, wow, out of Maryland, 33% of the population is Black.
Period.
So, why are we not, we should have more than no licenses out of this industry. It's immediately from day one, those licenses were worth millions of dollars. We saw people selling their licenses for $30 million.
Mm-hmm.
And no Black people had a chance to get that. So I realized then, I was like, there's a gap there for ownership. And for the past 5 years, I'd say I've been in industry for about 6 years, but for 5 years, I've been a outspoken advocate for African American participation. And my way of giving back is trying to reach back and give people opportunities to hear conversations like all of the sessions here, so they can learn and be empowered and have what I didn't have, which is guidance.
What I also saw is that you are a fourth generation woman entrepreneur. So shout out to Madam CJ Walker series on Netflix that just came out. How do you think the like being raised around entrepreneurship helped you for this? And what are the ways in which you think it kind of hamstrung you or hindered your process? Because this is a new budding industry, no pun intended, but it is, a new industry.
I always think about how it helped, but it definitely did hinder a little bit. But I think it helped because, one, I saw my mom being independent and bold. My mom and my dad, I grew up with both of them my whole life. So it's not like I saw, my mom by herself just making it work. But at the same time, she still exuded so much independence. So for me, it was just very natural for me to like go off and step on my own. I never felt like I had to have help because I watched my mom do so many things on her own. She always would bring me with her. And then I watched my grandma, who's 86 right now, and she's probably bothering one of her tenants trying to get her rent. She's a real estate broker and owns a lot of properties. I mean, that's just that's all the women around me. So it was good, but I think it hindered me because I think sometimes it made me a little headstrong, a little bossy. I think, with friendships and relationships, I had to learn that I was bossy and that I could have been a little bit demanding. And I had to learn how to turn that into a strength rather than a weakness and something that would make people dislike me or to be rude. I had to learn to turn that into leadership and guidance and empathy. But I had to really look inside of myself to get that out.
I think, and it's so funny because I think that so often the terms that we even use for women in business or women in leadership or women entrepreneurs are inherently sexist. Like bossy, right. You don't really hear men get called bossy or feisty ever. And even if like they're angry, it shows it's passion, right? And so I think that we should give ourselves those same terms. I think bossy means something good now. But it also, I think that you just have to be mindful of it and not let it hold you back too much. How have you seen your youth, like meaning your age, be a benefit to you in this industry?
Yeah, so I think my youth allows me to connect with a different generation. And this is the generation that is really pushing forth the movement. Millennials, we are the ones that are just like really making the culture be cool and making it be something that, I mean, we're the ones talking to our grandparents like, grandma, you really should try this salve. Like, I know your knees hurt and you should try this, or you should try this CBD oil. It'll really help with, your chronic pain that you're having, or, as far as our parents that might be going through cancer treatments, we're having them use cannabis. So I feel like we're the ones really pushing it forward, and I can connect because I'm one of you, and I try and be as honest and real as possible in this world that we live in, where people are trying to be something that they're not, and like perpetuate these fake identities and stuff like that. For me, I just try and be as real as possible because I want people to know, like, I'm a human being and just like you. Everything that I did, you can do it too. I'm not special. and we all have our different things that give us advantages and disadvantages in life. You know, I just use my advantages to I use my things to my advantage, and everyone should use their resources or go out and build them. Look, we don't all start in the same place, but we can all end up at the same place. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That is really, I think, interesting and compelling, but we don't all embrace that. What do you tell a young entrepreneur? I'm sure you get folks all the time who are like, I want to do what
Mhm.
you do, or
Yeah.
let me be your protege. What do you say to the folks that you don't have time to mentor, or they can't necessarily come and work with you or whatever? What are some of the things that you would give them? What are the keys that you think
Yeah.
are the initial keys to success for breaking into this industry?
I tell people the first thing to do is to look outside of the box. You know, don't look at just a plant touching business, meaning a dispensary or grow or processing. Definitely look into other ways you can be involved. Kind of go into your toolkit. What skills do you have? What can you do well now in whatever, you know, whatever you do now? Nothing related to cannabis. Just figure out what you do well right now. From there, see how you can tie that into the cannabis industry, because ancillary services are huge. Ancillary services are going to take up out of the multi-billion-dollar industry this is going to ancillary services will probably take up 40% of it,
Mm-hmm.
of the entire market share. So, you know, it's a really great industry to break into. There's a lot of innovation needed still in the industry. So there's just so many opportunities to start different types of businesses, and we need different voices from different types of people, and especially minorities. We need to hear your voice more in this industry. So ancillary businesses are a great way to start, as well as if you have aspirations in the future to own a dispensary or be a grower or be a processor, the way to definitely get started is make a brand and establish yourself. You can do that through an ancillary company, and then people will know you and you'll gain credibility in the space. And from there, you can enter right into the cannabis industry, you know, the plant touching side of the industry.
So given one of the articles recently in Forbes talks about cannabis sales being around $30 billion by 2025.
Yeah.
If that is indeed the case, how does someone who is a small mom and pop or small brothers, sisters, since we're talking about a newer generation
Yeah.
coming into the industry, how would they be competitive with folks who have an imprint in spaces like Canada or places where they have really big brands that are
Yeah.
doing well everywhere else? How can they set themselves up to be competitive for whenever this is federally legal?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question, and it's something that we kind of go back and forth with between ourselves in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
I really honestly do believe that cannabis long term, when I say long term, I mean like 10 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
is not, I do think that cannabis is going to become commoditized at a point, and what will survive is our brands. I say that because once it becomes federally legal, right? And then there's interstate commerce, then you don't need grows all over the United States. Right now, there are grow licenses all over because you can't ship over state lines. So you got to have grow houses in Maryland if you want to have cannabis in Maryland. But once you can ship over state lines, no one's going to want the weed grown in Maryland when they can get it from outside at in Northern California, where they're growing good weed. And let's not even talk about international export, because then, you know, El Chapo's farm's gonna come right back. You know, that 100,000 acre outdoor farm is gonna be growing weed again. And we're gonna be getting that same weed from the same place to think of. But I think, you know, to set people up to survive all of that, you definitely have to be developing a brand that and developing a following of people who care about you on an empathetic note. And I think some of the sessions we had a few. Gary yesterday did marketing analytics, which talked a lot about attaching to your brand and getting people on. And then Alex Wolf talked about differentiating your brand. and really connecting with people. And I think those two sessions are really important if you're trying to figure out how to establish yourself, because I think brands, that's what will be important. Just like all of our clothes are made in the same place, but we stick a different tag on it, but and all of a sudden one costs $80. We'll have the same thing. You stick a different sticker on the bottle, and it'll be more expensive.
So one of the things we've seen throughout the coronavirus epidemic is that there are certain things that have been deemed essential and they're doing really well, whereas everyone else has been really
Mhm.
hurt. As a medical dispensary operator, how are you surviving Corona? Are you doing okay? Are things
Yeah.
good? Are you scared about anything? How are you surviving coronavirus pandemic right now?
So we went through like little waves of feelings. It was like at first kind of like everyone in my store was like, "Oh, it's not a big deal." I was like, "Oh man, this is terrible. Maybe we need to shut the shop down." Then we were deemed essential the first time that Governor Hogan, issued the stay-at-home order. We got a notification saying we were essential. So that was awesome. We stayed open. And at first, we were just taking small precautions, cleaning up after ourselves. We were wearing gloves, but not masks.
Mm.
So then the CDC came out and said that you had to wear masks. So then at that time, I had one senior working for me. We told her we'd like you to stay home. Then we from there, any other employee, we kind of sent out an email. Anybody who is compromised at all, please stay home. Or anyone that doesn't feel comfortable. So we gave them that option. We issued a bonus to everyone who was coming to work for their service during this time, and we've just been taking a lot of precautions. But the store is doing well. We are definitely are part of the surge. I think that people are at home, and they just don't have too much to do, so or the more time to consume, as well as I think a lot of people are experiencing a lot of anxiety
Ooh, I
right
know.
now.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot of that. And today's 420. I'm sure my shop is like super busy right now, but we've pretty much just limited the amount of patients who can come inside. So there's long lines. We do curbside, and then we'll be onboarding a delivery company soon too.
Oh wow. Congrats on
Yeah.
the delivery company.
Yeah.
Um do you see yourself expanding your footprint beyond Maryland when it becomes legal in other spaces? Do you see yourself expanding beyond medical,
Yeah,
into recreational?
definitely. So my first, Maryland is considering adult use recreational right now. They're talking about it. They had a work group this year, and and of course it just ended up dying with COVID. And even before that, the work group pretty much was saying that they weren't ready to talk about adult use because they felt like the medical program still had kinks and they wanted to get that worked out. When I think, legislators, it's just really, I feel like they just don't know any better. So I think it comes to like education, because in my opinion, I'm like, well, adult use and recreational at the end of the day kind of are not related. They're kind of two different programs, and they do
Yeah.
two different things.
Yeah.
And one in Maryland, medical cannabis isn't even taxed. So they're not even getting tax money from it. The only money they're getting from it are the licensing fees that go straight back to the commission to run the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. So that Maryland, the state is, I mean, it's getting an economic burst from the spending, but essentially this could have been money that could have been going in the economy other ways. So I think that adult use needs to be a conversation that needs to happen in Maryland, because and I'm talking to like I'm speaking to a legislator,
Mhm.
talking like telling them things they want to hear. I'm not talking to them about why it really needs to be legalized, but I know they want to hear that about the tax revenue and all that. Right now, they're not getting any. So
Mhm.
I think that's a good motivator. But I definitely have aspirations to scale the company. I would like to become vertically integrated at a point, meaning control the whole supply chain, cultivation, processing, dispensing, potentially other areas of the supply chain as well. And whether I can do that in Maryland or elsewhere is kind of yet to be seen. This industry is just so odd because it's not like you can just say like, okay, I'm ready to scale. I've been operating for a year, 2 years, and I'm making money. So let me go open up my second store. You gotta get a license, which means you either have to buy it, which that's millions of dollars, or you gotta win one, which is extremely competitive.
Yeah. Are there any lessons that you feel like you've learned from operating your dispensary now over almost 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any lessons that you learned that you wish you would have known coming into operating a dispensary, and things that you're like, okay, now that I've learned that when they do, legalize adult use, this is how I'm moving?
I've learned so much over. So yeah, it's been about 5 years since I've been in the industry. We've been open for about 2, but yeah, about 5 since we won the license. And I've learned, I think, going into adult use, Mary and Maine.
It took 3 years for them to make the program operational.
We applied for the license in 2015. We got awarded in 2016. Then the end of 2016, like December.
Okay, got it.
And then we were looking for a building, and it was our stuff for another year or so. We opened September of 2018. It was
okay.
Whew, that was like, I'm over here thinking about it. Like,
I asked you that because there's so many hiccups because it's so new, and because I feel like Black folks and other folks who have been impacted by this industry are starting to apply more pressure. So it's not as like cut and dry as something else that they kind of like squeeze right past us. And so because of that, like even in LA, like you're seeing like all of these. I mean, like I don't know.
How many dispensaries, if you had to estimate, how many dispensaries do you think you see out there?
Too many. It's a lot, and this is before this program. They gave licenses out to social equity applicants that is now under an audit process. And so for me, I'm just like in LA, because you said you went to look for a building. That's what triggered it for me in LA. You have to have your real estate already to get the license. So they now have been sitting on rent money that they've been paying out or a mortgage for months. And that's like cost prohibitive to anybody that was adversely impacted by the war on drugs.
Yeah. So I mean, that the capital costs are just like, some of them it's outrageous. New York. Did you know? Okay, so New York's original licenses, they gave out 5 originally. They gave out 5 more. But you had to have, I want to say, like $5 million, a $5 million surety bond. And you also had to have your property and have ownership of it already. So, I mean, like, for real, if you were not a company that had $30 million at least, you can't even attempt.
And that's the thing to me. It's like, I don't want to keep having conversations about how this is a new opportunity for us when it's an opportunity in word only and not in deed. And so you bringing up even the concept of what you would say to legislators that they want to hear, it also has to be mixed with the stuff they need to hear, because how dare they set up another industry in this country that is built literally on the backs of our oppression, and they don't make us whole. You know what I mean? It's like, you can get tax revenue from this, but you also need to make us whole. Like, this might be the only restorative.
Do you think reparations could come into this conversation? Do you think reparations could come into this conversation?
I think it should.
Yeah.
I think that, and we're not talking about even slave labor reparations. We're talking about war on drugs reparations.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that is, I can't wait for us to get past the day where we ourselves are not afraid of that term, because we know that what we deserve, and it's like, that is just the right thing to do. That the threshold level, it is the right thing to do, and I don't think that means that anybody who is Black or brown who, went to jail should automatically get a license. What I do think it means is that you recognize the criteria is different because they were selling drugs to begin with because they didn't have access to resources the way you did, right?
Right.
You can't now make them be accountable for having the same level of access as, Bob or Mary Sue or Karen is the new thing.
Right.
You can't do that. It doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a whole discussion for another day. I don't even know what I asked you. What did I ask you? I asked you about, knowing what you know now.
Mm-hmm.
How would you move differently if it would have helped you become more sustainable?
Yeah, I think I definitely like moving into adult use as we get there. I'm going to focus more on building. I mean, we're doing it now at Mary and Main. We're shifting with the times and as we've learned things, but I want to focus so much more on connecting directly with consumers and implementing things that they want to see. So that just means more like back end. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so like back end data analytics, stuff like that, and making sure that we're really giving people exactly what they want and creating brands, because that's something I want to get into, creating a brand house and portfolio of brands, not just one. But I want to be able to connect, because I believe that's how you connect with different types of people, when you have brands that speak to them. And not just this one catch-all. Like, it works for this conference, 420 experience, it works, but that doesn't work for your weed. Like, grandma's not going to buy some weed that looks like a cartoon character is on it. Like, she's just not. But like, if it's really classy and it looks like medicine, she might be open to, like, okay, I'll try that. So I definitely want to like focus more on that, because I was so focused on just like being compliant in the regulations. That's what I was, but I think that's what I needed to be focused on at that time. It's funny because I always say that, like, I'm going to be looking back a few years from now, whenever the next round of licensees and then the next round after that come out, I'm going to be like, y'all didn't have to do half the mess that I had to do, because I believe the regulations are going to lighten up, as the years go on. And I'm going to just be looking like, y'all need to thank me, because I had to deal with inspectors showing up at our store, often every few weeks, petty fines, and then putting it up on the public website for everyone to read.
Did you think that you experienced more of that because of like your age and your race, or do you think that everyone was going through that because of the stigma attached to cannabis?
I mean, I think everybody thinks that people are doing things to them. So I'm saying it with a grain of salt. I definitely think a little bit of it was just because, I don't know if it was because of my age and my race, but I think it was because of all the publicity we were getting. So, I mean, I had a good, and it really hasn't ended. I mean, I have pretty good of a media presence. And especially around the time when we first opened, I mean, I was on the local news all the time. I was like everywhere. So they were seeing me and they were like, oh, who is this? I think it was a little bit of that, but the media presence was because of my age and race. So
yeah, so it follows that would also be the case. Do you I used to ask this often of a lot of like some of my favorite Black first, and so I'll ask you this as well. What are you going to do to ensure that your story, which is being one of the first, that it doesn't end there, and that you don't have the legacy of a one and only, but you ensure that you're opening doors and lifting kind of as you climb?
Definitely. I'm really glad you asked me that, because that's something that's so important to me. Sometimes I even have moments where I'm like, I don't want to do another interview because I want to do something new. And I don't want to keep talking about the same thing. Like, everyone knows I was the youngest. I don't care. Someone else younger needs to come up below me. I'm not doing my job because I'm still the youngest. But I think for me, the next thing is definitely expanding this company. So, the past like 15, 20 days or so, I have been pouring myself into this conference, which I'm so excited that I did, because for me, another thing I want to really get into in the future is being a thought leader and a true, advocate publicly facing for medical cannabis and social justice into cannabis. So I think that this conference was an awesome introduction to that for me. I realized that I really, really enjoy this. I love teaching people, so I knew I would enjoy that, but I really enjoyed curating the whole thing. So that's something new for me that I'm going to look into. I'm also really, after pouring myself into this 20 days, I'm about to pour myself into, we're in the middle of, like I said, trying to expand. So we're raising money, which is difficult in this space, but we are raising we are raising a few $1,000,000, and we are trying to go out and buy companies. So that's what I'm about to pour myself into. And, you know, I just believe, I've said it a few times too before, I believe in divine order. So I am showing God that I am ready and prepared by doing the work. And if it is not for me, then I know that I'm getting myself one step closer to the next thing that it is. So, I mean, I stay pretty positive because I've done that.
I think that's great, Hope. I think for the attendees and the participants, there's a networking tab on here, and you all should be mindful to use it. There are a lot of people in these industries, in every industry really, who do not think like Hope. And I think the fact that you know, you're using your platform to expose people to people you may know or you may be one call away from, so that they can do and be better, is powerful in and of itself. And I think already takes you out of the category of being the one and only. And so more power to you for sure. If there's anything that I can do to be helpful, I definitely want to be. And I look forward to seeing your brand imprint expand, you know, you personally becoming not the youngest anymore, but definitely being one of the most influential actors in this space, because it is so important that we start to see the scales of justice balance in our favor. So thank you for all you do, Hope, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much for taking some time out for me.